Well, the book of Exodus tells the story of the Hebrews' flight from Egypt, how God delivered them from Pharaoh's army at the Red Sea crossing and led them to Mount Sinai, where he gave Moses the 10 Commandments. Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them. Take a look.
For centuries, we've been praying at the wrong mountain. While millions of pilgrims bow before a peak in Egypt, the real Mount Sinai, where God spoke to Moses in fire, sits hidden, forbidden, and heavily guarded in the Arabian desert. Stone altars still stand. The burned summit remains blackened. Ancient boundaries mark where no one dared to tread. But here's the prophecy connection. This mountain was meant to be revealed in our generation. Quick reminder before we dive in. If you want to stay ahead of these prophetic discoveries, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss what's coming. Right now, in northwest Saudi Arabia, satellite images show a mountain peak scorched black, not from volcanic activity, but from what appears to be intense, sudden heat exposure. The surrounding peaks are untouched. Only this one summit bears the mark of fire. At its base sits a 60-foot granite rock, split perfectly down the middle, with ancient water channels carved into stone in one of the world's driest regions. Nearby stand 12 weathered stone pillars arranged with obvious intention. But here's what's most stunning. Saudi authorities have fenced off the entire area. Military checkpoints, deleted photographs, detained researchers. Even Google Earth shows blurred, low-resolution images of this specific location. Why would a government guard an empty mountain with such intensity? Because they know what archaeologists are discovering, that every detail matches the biblical account of Mount Sinai. Not metaphorically, literally, stone by stone, the evidence is undeniable. Exodus 19:18 declares, Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. This wasn't symbolic language. Moses recorded specific, physical details. A mountain transformed by divine fire, boundaries that couldn't be crossed, water flowing from split rock, stone altars built by human hands. But here's the prophetic element scholars are just beginning to understand. Micah 4:1 promises that, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and peoples will stream to it. Jesus himself declared in Luke 8:17, there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Could the unveiling of the true Mount Sinai be prophetic fulfillment? A divine revelation meant specifically for our generation, the generation that needed to witness God's faithfulness etched in stone. The story begins with a mistake that lasted centuries.
This actually connects to something I covered about prophetic timing in God's perfect revelations. You can tap the card up here if you want to see how these patterns repeat throughout Scripture. Throughout Scripture, we see a pattern. God reveals his truth precisely when his people need it most. Just as Daniel's prophecy about the 70 weeks pointed to Christ's exact timing, just as Ezekiel's prophecies about Israel's restoration unfolded in 1948, the revelation of Mount Sinai appears to follow the same divine schedule. Consider the parallels. When Israel needed proof of God's faithfulness before entering the Promised Land, he revealed his glory on Mount Sinai. When early Christians needed confirmation of Christ's fulfillment of the law, the mountain stood as testimony to God's covenant with Moses. And now, in an age when faith is under assault, when biblical authority is questioned, when archaeological experts claim Scripture is mythology, suddenly, the physical evidence of God's most dramatic Old Testament encounter emerges from the desert sand. This isn't coincidence, it's providence. The pattern repeats throughout biblical prophecy. Habakkuk 2:14 promises, "The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea."
We're witnessing that filling happen in real time. Just as the Dead Sea Scrolls emerged in 1947, the same year Israel declared independence, confirming biblical accuracy at the precise moment critics were dismissing Scripture as unreliable. Mount Sinai's revelation comes when our generation most needs tangible proof of God's faithfulness. The technology exists now that didn't exist before. Satellite imagery reveals what human eyes couldn't see. Ground-penetrating radar detects what traditional archaeology missed. Digital cameras document what previous generations could only describe in words. Even the resistance follows biblical patterns. Pharaoh's hardened heart, the Sanhedrin's rejection of Christ. The world system always fights against divine revelation, not because the evidence is weak, but because the implications are too strong. Every time God reveals hidden truth, institutions tremble, economic systems shake, religious establishments resist, political powers intervene. The Saudi government's extreme secrecy around Jebel Allah's isn't protecting empty desert, it's protecting a narrative. Because if this mountain is truly Mount Sinai, everything changes. Right now, 3 massive obstacles stand between the world and full acknowledgement of this discovery. First, economic resistance. Egypt's religious tourism industry generates billions annually from Sinai Peninsula pilgrimages. Monasteries, tour companies, entire cities built around the traditional site would face economic collapse if the true Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. Second, religious institutional pride. For centuries, Eastern Orthodox and Catholic traditions have centered pilgrim routes around the Egyptian location. Admitting error would mean rewriting theological teachings, restructuring pilgrim programs, and acknowledging that human tradition sometimes obscures divine truth. And third, political control. Saudi Arabia maintains strict religious authority over Islamic holy sites. Acknowledging a major Judeo-Christian holy site within their borders would create unprecedented diplomatic and religious complications. But here's what makes this prophetic rather than merely archaeological. Every obstacle follows biblical precedent. God's truth has always emerged despite human resistance. The stone the builders rejected becomes the cornerstone. What man tries to hide, God brings to light. Political powers rage, but the Lord laughs at their plans. Everything is in place except acknowledgement. The evidence exists. The technology confirms it. Independent researchers document it. Even local Bedouins have preserved the oral tradition for generations. We're living through that dramatic moment when truth stands at the door, knocking, while institutions debate whether to let it in. Daniel 12:4 prophesied, "Many will go here and there to increase knowledge." In these last days, hidden things would be revealed. Ancient mysteries would surface. The mountain of God's voice is no longer lost. It's simply waiting for this generation to listen. Jesus warned us, learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Matthew 24:32-33. The signs are here. Ancient prophecies are being fulfilled in real time. What was hidden is being revealed. What was lost is being found.
But this isn't just about archaeological discovery. This is about spiritual awakening. When God revealed himself on Mount Sinai the first time, it wasn't for Moses alone. It was for an entire generation that needed to see his power, hear his voice, and understand his covenant. The mountain shook. The people trembled. Lives were changed. If he's revealing his mountain again, it's because our generation desperately needs the same encounter. We live in times when biblical faith is mocked, when God's existence is questioned, when his people wander in spiritual wilderness. Just as the Israelites needed visible proof of God's presence, we need tangible evidence of his faithfulness. The blackened peak stands as testimony. The split rock declares his provision. The ancient boundaries remind us that some things remain holy, unchangeable, eternal. Don't miss what's unfolding before your eyes. This isn't just history being rewritten. This is prophecy being fulfilled. This is God speaking to a generation that forgot how to listen. The mountain still stands. The evidence remains. The question is, will you respond? Isaiah 45 promises, "The glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." That revelation is happening now, in your lifetime, before your eyes. The mountain where God's voice once thundered with the Ten Commandments stands revealed, its stones crying out the truth of his eternal covenant. What human tradition buried, divine timing has uncovered. Don't miss what's unfolding. Hit subscribe right now so you won't miss the signs appearing before it's too late. Share this with someone who needs to see God's faithfulness proven in stone. The mountain of Moses has been found. The question isn't whether it's real. The question is whether you're ready to listen when the stones themselves bear witness to the living God. And I've put together a complete playlist on biblical prophecies being fulfilled right now. Your next step is waiting right there.